Okay. Can you go ahead and start by just telling me your name and where you're from and how you had got started in this business?
Yeah. So my name is Sonia Gutierrez. I'm a reporter with Nine News. And I got started in the business actually through internships when I was in college. I started very young doing internships with Univision when I was a freshman in college. And that's a really funny story, but I'll start with kind of where I'm from and the beginning. So I was born in Parral, Chihuahua, Mexico, which is a northern state in Mexico. And my family and I immigrated here when I was super young. I never went back. We lived in around 32nd and Federal. So it was a very different community back in the day when I lived there. My parents didn't speak any English, so I grew up completely bilingual. I grew up, with that life of translating for my parents all the time, and constantly being reminded by my parents that they sacrificed a lot and they left a lot in Mexico for us to have a better life here. And so for us to always keep that at the forefront of our mind and to remember where we come from, and to always do the best that we can in school, that they came here for our education. So I always had that in mind, going through school. I really bought into this whole idea of the American dream. My parents sacrificed everything for me to live my American dream, and I wanted to go to college just like all my my fellow students. And I was in IB, I was in theater, I just ate it all up. I was so excited to go to college, and when junior year came around, and when you start like working on your personal essay and like SATs and start thinking about college. Well, I was in the AVID program, and we were filling everything out, and I didn't have a social security number. And I remember my best friend and I went to our counselor, and we said, oh, we're so excited to go to college. Here's our little folder with everything we need, tell us what's next. And she looked at it open, and she's like, oh, you're missing your social security number. Go back home, ask your mom for it, fill it out, come back. So, my best friend went back home, asked our mom, said my mom, I remember she was like, what did she ask you for? And I said, oh, the social security number, I think it goes right here. And she said, oh, don't talk to that woman again. You don't have one, but don't tell her that, and don't talk to her again. You're not supposed to tell anyone that you don't have one. And I didn't understand why, I was like, well, she's my high school counselor. She's here to help us. And like, why would I not go back? Like, how am I going to make it to college? So very innocently. And I was very naive about the whole situation. I went back and I told my counselor, hey, my mom told me that I don't have a social security number, but I'm sure there's no problem, because the rest of my application is here. Should we just like put zeros or, cross it out? I don't know, leave blank. And I'll never forget, she closed that manila folder, put it down, and she said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but there are no opportunities for people like you. You're going to have to graduate, start working, and wait to see what happens with the laws. And if you have a pathway to citizenship, maybe then you can apply, maybe then you can go to college. And I remember just feeling completely crushed to hear from the person, the counselor, the person that was supposed to have the answers for us, be our guidance, tell me that, the buck stopped there for me just because I was missing a social security number. And so I started becoming politically active. And at the time, Colorado Asset was still a bill. And I was like, this is my chance. This is my opportunity to at least have a shot to go to school and pay the same amount of money that other people do, because as an undocumented student, I was getting charged 3 times more. And obviously, I come from a very humble family, una familia bien humilde. My dad worked in construction at the time. My mom cleans houses. She still does to this day, And so there was no way that we were going to be able to pay for my school. There's no way. And I just felt terrible thinking about like, oh yeah, mom, the semester is going to be this much. There was no way. There was no way. And I knew that. And so I followed that bill very closely. And my senior year of high school, I talk about this and it's like I'm reliving it all over again. But my senior year of high school, the bill was in front of the Senate, was being read. And so I went and gave my testimony about why it was important, and it didn't pass. And I remember feeling, man, that was my shot. That was my shot to go. And now I can't, because there's no way I can pay for this, you know? And there are not a lot of options for undocumented students to apply for scholarships. And so by the grace of God, I mean, it was a complete blessing that later that summer, I got a call from a woman at Metro and said, hey, someone listened to your story, heard your story when you testified for Colorado Asset, and they were upset that the state didn't do anything to help you, so he wants to help you. And he wants to pay for your school. So I got a private sponsor to pay for my schooling. And I couldn't believe it. I remember it was my mom's birthday when she told me, and in tears, I told my mom, I didn't have anything to give you for your birthday this year, but I think this is the best gift I could have ever given you. And yeah, I started school, and right away, I hadn't even started classes when I called Univision and I said, hey, I'm interested in doing an internship. And they were like, what year are you in college? And I was like, a freshman. I start in August. And they were like, absolutely not. You're so young, you know? But luckily for me, the gentleman in the radio station that is attached to Univision were very moved just by, you know, my determination and my eagerness to be a part of. So I was like, I'll fetch you the coffee, I'll print out work, whatever you need. I just want to help. I just want to be here. And they said, go back to school and see if they'll let you be an intern with us. And I went back to Metro, and I remember asking, like, hey, I got an internship lined up. All I need is you're okay. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They said, absolutely not. You know, like, we send students to represent our university to these places to do internships. We don't even know who you are. You're so young. You're not gonna know what you're doing. You know, no. And I was like, but I already got it. Like, all I need is you to allow me to do this. And after one semester, they see how I did, and then we'll talk it again. But I was very persistent with Univision and with the school. And Univision ended up like basically asking them, like, yeah, we want her to be an intern. And so I started being an intern with Univision. I was so young. I mean, fresh out of high school. And this is how long ago it was. Facebook was like just kind of starting. Univision Colorado had 26 likes on their Facebook, 26. And they had me as the intern. Like, I was their face cam girl is what they called it. So they gave me a little camera, and I was the behind the scenes reporter for Facebook. And I got the Facebook likes from 26 to 3,000. And we were so excited. But I mean, that's how long ago it was, you know, and I took that opportunity and I ran with it. And from there, I was lucky enough that the people that worked at Univision started Telemundo. So they recruited me to be an intern with them. And I was lucky again that Telemundo was inside of the 9 News building. So 9 News saw the work that I did with Telemundo, because I was very, when I was at Telemundo, I was very active in both newsrooms. I would go to the meetings for 9 News, and I would go to the meetings for Telemundo. And I always had something to say. I would say, oh, I have a contact for that, or I have a story idea that I think you guys would be interested. And I was just this young girl, you know, I was an intern with Telemundo. So that's when they were interested in me being an intern with 9, and I transitioned to being an intern with 9. And so by the time I graduated, I had already been in 3 newsrooms. So it was a great opportunity. And the reason why I went into journalism is because of my experience when I was in high school. You know, as an undocumented student, I would go, I followed this bill very closely, you know? And so I was so excited every afternoon to come and watch TV and say, oh my God, today, we had a reading. I want to see how they covered it on the news. And every time I would sit and watch, I felt like they would completely miss the point. Like I never felt represented in those stories. I never felt like the authentic voices of a community were being portrayed in the stories that I saw. And so, I mean, to say it in an extremely cliche way, I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. And that is more people who look like us telling our stories, from an authentic place. And that's why I went into it. And ever since I stepped foot in Univision, I fell in love with journalism and the power that journalism has. And meeting people, and I was just so curious about everything that I saw. And to me, since I love doing a little bit of everything, it just felt so perfect because I was a part of whoever I was interviewing. I was a part of their highest and lowest. You know what I mean? Like I was at the forefront of everything that was happening, and it was so. I mean, it's still such an honor to say that I'm a reporter for 9 News. When at one point I was a student who was told that there were no opportunities for people like me.
Your story is so inspiring. So thank you for telling that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about what every day looks like for you at 9 News now as a journalist?
Yeah. So the day starts with looking for story ideas, right? So as a reporter, my responsibilities are to look for story ideas and present them in our morning editorial meeting. So by 9 a.m., I need to have solid story pitches, right? This is going on. This is why it's important. These are the people I can talk to. And I look it up, and by 9 a.m., I submit it into Slack. By 9:30, we have our Zoom meeting now. It used to be in person, but we now have a Zoom meeting where basically I present the story ideas that I have. And then as a team, we all talk about them. Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds important. That sounds interesting. It sounds like let's do that. Let's go ahead and do that. And I get assigned either one of the stories that I pitched, or if there's something pressing that happened, maybe the night before that we need some follow-up, or maybe that day something is going to happen. There's going to be protests downtown and we need someone to go. There's going to be a press conference with the governor who has whatever is the latest thing, I get assigned that. I start then by making calls and setting up interviews. So once I have my story, I look into, okay, who are going to be the players, who am I curious to hear from? Who are going to be the players that have the most information? And so I do some research, I identify who are the people I want to interview, I call them to set up the interviews. And because I'm a MMJ, I do my own camera work, and I edit my own stuff, I write my own stuff, and I do my own online copy. So everything I do myself. Now that that we're in quarantine, it's a little bit different. Sometimes I still work by myself, but I do Zoom interviews. Or I have a partner, and then my partner helps, they're photojournalists, so they help tell the story visually, and then they edit it. But so I get the interviews, and then I listen to the interviews, I transcribe them, I do a little bit more research to fact check what they're telling me, or to add context to whatever they're saying, so that people can, understand the context always adds. So I look for context. And then I write the story, I turn it in, and my manager buddy reads it, tells me, okay, change this, change that, or it looks good, or did you ask this? So it's just, we try to have as many eyes on our story as we can. And then after that is approved, I track. So I just record my voice. I send it to the photographer, or if I'm editing myself, I edit it, I cut it, and I edit it with the SOT, and I turn it in. Sometimes they have me going live from a different location, and I just go and get ready to be on TV and present the story. Or if it's just a straight package, I just turn it in and then work on my web story, and then I'm done.
That's really exciting.
It's a lot.
Yeah, busy day. Do you feel like your childhood impacted who you are today and how much of a hard worker that you are today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that for me, seeing my parents work hard, so hard, and constantly tell me, you know, the reward for our work is you building a great life for yourself. You know, I always keep that up. I always remember that. When there's really hard days at work, really hard days that I'm just like, man, like this really sucks, or this is like just stuff that sometimes you wish you didn't have to deal with. I remember that, you know, how incredibly proud my parents are to see their daughter on 9 News. You know, their daughter say, for 9 News, I'm Sonia Gutierrez, you know? So absolutely, me growing up and seeing my parents never complain about working too much, never, you know, miss a day of work, really. And my dad worked so much. My mom worked so much. Never did they complain. They never said, you know, like, oh, that's not in my job description. Never. They did what they had to do, and beyond, you know. They always felt blessed for what they have. And I feel like I definitely carry those values with me. You know, I carry that work ethic, because that's what I grew up with. That's what I saw. I never saw my parents complain about work, so I don't complain about work. You know, like I always saw my parents happy to be where they're at, so I'm happy and blessed to be where I'm at. And then also growing up as a Mexican immigrant in Colorado, I understand the state and the world in a different way. You know, I grew up translating for my parents. I grew up, you know, scared of police if they were going to stop us. You know, scared that they were going to ask for, you know, a driver's license and end up figuring out, you know, something and deport my parents. Like, you know, so I feel like the way I grew up gave me the heart that I have for the stories that I do. So when I interview people, I always talk to them from my heart. And I always say, I understand where you're coming from. I do. I was there, you know, my family was there. So I think that gives people feel that. People feel when someone genuinely understands where they're coming from, and they open up a lot more, you know. And the fact that I grow up here, like I know a lot of people, and I've been blessed with a lot of great mentors, and those mentors now are sources in the community. So absolutely, I am the person I am today because of my upbringing.
That's a perfect leeway into my next question. I was going to ask you about mentors that you had growing up and how important you think mentors are for a person.
Incredibly important. I mean, seriously, I didn't know what a semester was. I didn't know what credits were. I didn't know how to sign up for classes, what classes were, what a major was. I didn't know any of that. I'm the first in my family to go to college. I didn't know any of that. If it wasn't for my mentors who taught me what to other people might seem so basic, I wouldn't have made it. You know what I mean? Like, and just having people to bounce off ideas from, to constantly encourage me, because as a person of color, like you hear from everywhere, and sometimes you don't hear it, but you feel it. There's microaggressions everywhere, and you grow up with those, you know, and sometimes you internalize those. And so having mentors who constantly told me, you can do that, you can do it, you can do anything you set your mind to, like, look how far you've gotten, now you can go further, you know. My parents were amazing support. My mentors were the ones that kind of guided me through the systems that my parents didn't know. My parents were my cheerleaders, but my mentors were my guide, you know?
Can you talk to me about some tips that you have for people that are wanting to go into the journalism field?
Yes, network, do internships, and make sure you're going to this field because you have a heart for it, because you understand why journalism is important, because it's hard. It's hard. The deadlines are hard. what you deal with sometimes with viewer emails, sometimes within the newsroom, it's hard, it's overwhelming. So if you have that strong foundation and you understand why you went into journalism, that is going to help you get through it. I would say network as much as you can, both in the business and out of the business. Network outside of the business for sources. A journalist is their sources. Make sure you have people that trust you and that you trust to get tips on what's going on. That's so important. Unfortunately, this business is who you know. It is. It is. So be a part of organizations. I'm a part of NAHJ. So join the organizations that there are locally. Don't be afraid to reach out to news directors and say, look, I'm looking for maybe a shadow opportunity. I'd love to meet with you to see how it is on a day in a newsroom. How can I get myself in the door through internships? Because until you are in a newsroom and you feel that adrenaline, that feeling of being in a newsroom, you don't know what it's like. Being in a class is very different. Seeing a rundown drawn on a whiteboard is not the same as in the computer. You know what I mean? And making sure you know how to navigate that. When I started as an Univision, I didn't even know what a rundown was. I was a freshman. I didn't know what it was. Yeah, and those were the things that were basic. Everyone expected me to know. And luckily, other people, I was like, hey, I actually don't know what it is. Can you teach me real quick? I don't want to look like a fool in front of the news director, but can you teach me, So yeah, network, do internships, and make sure you have that strong foundation in your heart of why you want to be a journalist.
With how demanding that this field is, how do you balance kind of doing all of this work while still taking care of yourself?
I think that's something that we'll always be working on, Now that I'm a mom, I have very much prioritized my personal life, my son, and making sure that my life at home is complete and happy, because then everything else won't fall in place. I think that for a long time, because I love journalism, I love it. And so for a long time, I would literally, when I was in South Carolina, I was out there by myself. And so I would go out and try to have fun and have fun with my friends, but I was constantly like, oh, that would be a good story. Oh, I didn't know that was going on. I'm gonna pitch that tomorrow. You know what I mean? So it's like a way of life, but you also have to be very careful in not letting it be your life completely. Yes, be vigilant. If you're out and you're like, oh, that's actually a really good story, I never thought about that, I'm gonna ask about it tomorrow. Yeah, be curious. As a journalist, you're naturally curious, but don't work. It's very easy for you to work all the hours of the day, but have hobbies that you like. I like to do chunky, handmade, so do chunky blankets. I like to make earrings. I like to sew. I made my son a swing, so I have a lot of little projects that get my mind off of everything, and that I have my own hobbies for me, for my own space. My husband has his, and then we have family hobbies, and when I'm at work, I give work 100%. When I'm home, I give my family 100%. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good skill that young women of color need to really practice a lot more, learning how to take care of ourselves along with everything. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you say that, because I growing up, Latina, oh, mental health, what, now, we're tough, we don't need a, it's taboo. I don't know how to explain it, but it's taboo to talk about mental health. and to say I took a day off because I really needed it. Like the first time I did that in South Carolina, I got yelled at by my parents. Like my parents were like, "What? You took a day off to do nothing? Because you're not even sick?" Like they were worried sick that I was gonna get fired. You know, and even me, like the whole day I was like anxious. I was like, "Oh my God." Like today I needed it because I needed a mental health day, but like it feels so weird, But we have to do that. We have to do that. It's okay to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. I know that a big part of journalism is like kind of trying to be objective. How do you balance your beliefs and opinions as a person in today's very divided political climate with trying to be objective?
Yeah. The way I do it is I always put myself in the shoes of the person I'm talking to, right? So I try to really understand why they think what they think. I think this for me in particular was, I really put myself to that test when DACA was going through the court system, when we were covering the elections, when we were covering a lot of, just the rhetoric around immigrants. But I always made sure that I respected the person that I was interviewing and I respected their views. So if that's what they think, that's what they think. And if and my thoughts are not important. The story is about them. The story is about what I'm covering. The story is about what is factual, what is true, and my opinion has nothing to do with it. Now, with that said, I think as an immigrant, as a woman of color, I feel like it's been harder for my managers to see me as a serious journalist covering immigration. For me, I know people think that of me because I'm a Latina covering immigration. Oh, she must be giving it a spin because she's Latina, she's Mexican, she's immigrant. So because of that, I make sure that I have every duck in a row. I make sure that every word I say is backed up. I make sure that I look at it and then I look at it again and then I look at it again, And I do that because I am aware about what other people might think about my piece because I did it and just because I did it. So that, I think, if anything, that's been the hardest thing for me to accept, for me to understand that I'm going to be looked at differently by my managers and by the audience, no matter what I do. It's hard. It's hard. And when the whole immigration thing happened, my managers didn't know really how, because I pitch a lot of stories in my community, and a lot of stories in immigration. It's my expertise. I know what it's like. And at one point, I was told that I couldn't cover immigration stories, just until I disclosed my status. And that is the hardest burden that you can put on an immigrant whose life has been spent afraid, And although I am now a citizen, I'm a resident, it's so hard. It was hard to go through that process, and say, wait a minute, I'm a journalist, and if there's no taint in my work, then there's no reason why I should be treated differently when it comes to covering stories in my community. If anything, people like me should be valued for the insight that we bring about our communities and the expertise that we bring on the topic, not treated like we come with the bias because of who we are.
Thank you about that. I know you had talked about like how you've always known that journalism is something that you wanted to do, but do you ever remember a moment in your life where you knew that this would be the career for you?
In high school. I already told you about that one, that I didn't see myself represented on TV, and I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see.
Sorry. What are some positive things that you see about the younger generations?
Oh, so much. I mean, what we're going through right now gets me very excited about the future, you know? Just this, I love that the younger generation is so proud and is so unafraid and values themselves first. I've noticed that, you know, back when I was younger and, you know, it was, I would have never said that I was a dreamer, you know, like I was a part of the first kind of wave of dreamers that said, you know what, we're undocumented, we're unafraid. I feel like now the younger generation, like, you guys feel it. It took us a while to get to that point, and it was scary still, you know, like we were undocumented, unafraid, but still, like, a lot of things were still, you guys are not scared of that. Like, you are who you are, you know your value, and you claim your value where you go. And I think that is so exciting for the future. Wherever young people of color end up, I know that they'll make their voices heard, and that's so exciting.
Thank you. Do you have any advice that you would give to younger generations?
Advice to younger generations? Don't be like, don't limit yourself in your capacity and your potential, you know? I feel like that's something I wish would have been said to me too, and it was, and I think that's why I am here, because people told me along the way, dream big and then dream bigger, you know? Dream big, get there, and then think about what's next, you know? Like that's what I would say. Like, you control where you go. You are way more valuable than you will ever know. And just take everything and run. Like, you guys, the way you guys understand social media is something that managers everywhere, including newsrooms, don't know. Like, you right now could walk into a newsroom and know more than web digital producers right now, you know? Because like TikTok, like Instagram, a lot of these social platforms, they evolve so fast, and only you guys know what's cool, you know? Like, only you guys know how to work those things. We're some dinosaurs, you know, just trying to stay relevant. You know, or you know, some newsrooms are. So yeah, I mean, know that you are super valuable, and always, but always remember, you know, where you come from, and stay super humble. That, I mean, I feel like we know that, you know, like, we know that because of the way we grew up. We'll never forget that.
How do you handle criticism, especially as an important public figure? How do you handle that and kind of deal with that?
Criticism of my work or just of my person?
Both. Like, if like, say if you put out work and someone like criticizes you, so you have your work, like when someone criticizes your work, how do you handle that?
I'll give you an example of a personal one first, and then it kind of ties in with work. It kind of ties in. So I'll give you a story, and then it kind of ties in with it. When I first moved to South Carolina, it was my first reporter job. And South Carolina doesn't have any Spanish news outlets. I'm bilingual, so I was so excited because I picked South Carolina for a reason. They were one of the top 10 states with an exponential growth of Latinos and no Spanish news outlets. I mean, I was like, this is perfect. You know, I can go represent this community. When I got there, the web editor was like, okay, you know, write up a little bio so we can put it on the website with your picture. And I was like, yeah, wonderful. I'm going to do it in English and I'm going to do it in Spanish. I'm going to translate it. And he said, oh, whoa, remember where you're at? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're in South Carolina. Are you sure you want to write it in Spanish? And I said, you know what? If I get 100 mean emails for me writing my bio in Spanish and English, but I get one good story from someone reading my bio in Spanish, feeling comfortable enough to share their story with me, bring it. It's worth it, you know? So that's kind of how I handled that and how I see it, you know? Like if the color of my skin or where I come from offends anyone, I do my job, I do my part. That's all I can control.
That's really awesome. Can you talk to me about where you see yourself in 10 years?
I see myself in 10 years, my son is going to be 10. I see myself on an investigative team at a news station, or working somehow still using this field, but I learned this from my husband. I want to work in a place that makes me happy, and I feel very proud of the work that I do because I want my son to see that example and to feel proud of his mom and to grow up with the same feelings that I did about my parents.
Is there anything that you haven't done in life that you still want to do?
Travel. So because of my status, I wasn't able to leave the United States. After I got married, now I'm a resident, I can leave the United States. You know, it was so surreal to me when I first got the envelope with my permanent resident card. I didn't open it for weeks. I couldn't imagine my life like not being undocumented, you know? So I feel like for when I was growing up, like I would hear so much about traveling, this and that, but I knew I couldn't do it. So I never allowed myself to dream about traveling, you know, because I didn't want to put myself in that situation where I knew I couldn't do it. So why, you know? So now that I have it, I get to dream about that.
Where do you want to travel to?
One of the first places I want to go to is Peru, because that's my dad's dream of visiting one day. And even if he doesn't get to go, I want to go see it for him. So I want to go to Peru. I also I want to see the country that I'm from, you know. I would love to go to Mexico and eat street tacos. You know, I want to travel. Those are the two places I thought about. It's taken me a long time to kind of give myself permission to dream of. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You want me to answer that quick question quickly?
Yeah. Can you tell me what impact do you want to have on this world?
I want to use the platform that I have as a journalist to elevate as many different kinds of stories as I can, hopefully for people to understand each other a little bit better, and really make it a better place for all of us. You know, like I feel like we have so much power to do stories that really impacts communities, and I want to be a part of that as much as I can. So I want to use journalism to empower and to advocate and to help, and yeah, it's a wonderful career, and so to be a part of it is an honor.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much for once again giving me your time. I know you're very busy with everything, especially with the amount of stories you probably have right now, but I want to thank you for giving me your time to sit down and let me ask you these questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime, you feel free to reach out. The number that you have is my cell phone number.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Best of luck with school.
Thank you.
Best of luck. And even if you make it into a newsroom and you look around and you realize you're the only person that looks like you, don't be discouraged, okay? They're gonna say things, and just know that you're there for a purpose, you know? And if you weren't there, there would be no one who looked like you. And that's worse.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Best of luck with everything, okay?
You too. Have a good night. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye. Oh, can you send me links to whatever you...
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get it uploaded by the end of this weekend, so I can send you the link once I get that up and everything.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.